Hello. I've got a seminar that I'm delivering next week on Carl Jung and various archetypal psychologists, people like Hillman and Rollo May and so on. And so I've been reading around and researching, deciding exactly what to put in it and what not to put in it, the usual things you do with seminars, which is it's always quite useful to remind yourself of things that you used to know a long time ago and completely forgot, as well as for things you never knew in the first place that expands your knowledge. One of the things that has struck me as I've been doing the research is how perhaps relevant some of this is to paganism. And whilst the seminar is just one for the general public, it's not a pagan seminar. It's for absolutely anyone of whatever religion or no religion at all. Um, this podcast, I'm thinking more in connection with the pagan side of this. There's a quote from Jung's book, Spirit in Man, Art and Literature, which I'll read in a second. It's kind of paraphrased by other people in a much shorter way. I'll get to the paraphrase in a second. But the quote that's interesting me at the moment, it's a little wordy. For one can fall victim to possession if one does not understand betimes why no one is possessed. One should ask oneself for once, why has this idea taken possession of me? What does that mean in regards to myself? A modest doubt like this can save us from falling headfirst into the idea and vanishing forever. What he's talking about there, and it alludes to other things he said throughout his other works, is the idea of complexes, which is itself contingent on his idea of archetypes, and all these ideas interact with each other. That Jung argues that the human mind has existed for a remarkably long period of time, and it's all of our minds have come together. It's a little bit like that idea you get in Doctor Who of the Matrix, where every dying Time Lord kind of uploads their brain, or at least the contents of their brain, into this semi-organic web of understanding, which contains the memories and the experiences of every dead Time Lord there's ever been. And living Time Lords can plug themselves into the Matrix and find out ideas from long dead Time Lords, which is perhaps an idea that whichever scriptwriter it was first came up with it in the TV show probably took from Jung, or at least somebody very similar to Jung in their ideas, because Jung's idea of the collective unconscious is rather like that, except you don't have to be dead to put your ideas into it. So every living human being on the planet at the moment, every living human being that has ever been on the planet, which is just an insane number of people over the course of hundreds of thousands of years, and in potentia, every living human being that ever will be on the planet for as long as the human race may yet survive, however long that's going to be. All of our minds interconnect. Um, we share experiences, we share emotions, we share ideas and concepts. And it's suggesting not just in that one human life is quite similar to another, the unconscious is almost like kind of an internet before there was an internet, except it exists at this somewhat nebulous spiritual level, which Jung never wholly explains. And possibly it is something that would defy explanation anyway at the moment. But it's a way of connecting to other people. And whilst I've said every future generation, that's more my spin on it rather than Jung's, um, because my understanding of time is somewhat fluid, not dissimilar to the Vedic understanding of time, that whilst we live in the moment, past, present, future are not neat, confined boxes. There it's more a matter of perception and how we go in and out of the past, the present, and the future in all sorts of weird and wonderful ways, which I think fits quite well with the Western pagan view as well as the Vedic view throughout India and all the regions around India where Vedic religions have spread to and Vedic ideas have spread to. Shared experience builds up, and so there are key critical experiences that pretty much every human being on the planet, if not actually every human being on the planet, has experience of. So everyone has a mother, even if they've never met her, even if she died in childbirth or whatever. They all have a mother, therefore they all have an idea, a notion of motherhood. And for those women who become mothers, they will not only have the idea of their own mother, but their experience of being a mother. Likewise, everyone has a father, and again, even if they never met him, or they couldn't stand him, or whatever else, they have an experience, an idea, a quality, a notion of what a father is, what a father should be, the reality of what their own father actually was. And for those men who become fathers or stepfathers or so forth, they have their own direct experience of fatherhood. So things like that, and love, death, rage, despair, joy, these are experiences common to pretty much the whole of humanity. For anyone who lives long enough, and let's face it, probably doesn't take many weeks as an infant to experience all of those different emotions. They are something we all participate in. And so Jung says these are archetypal presences. They're huge, big, grand ideas that have a semi-autonomous existence within the collective human understanding. And some modern day pagans, those who are more at the atheist end of the spectrum, often say that they view the gods and the goddesses of ancient mythology as being rather not so much gods in the Christian sense of the understanding or the Muslim sense of the understanding as this actual being out there, but rather that they are embodiments of collective human experience. So Aphrodite could be understood as an embodiment of love. Pan could be understood as an embodiment of wildness and freedom and nature and so on. Different levels of understanding as to how you want to take that. I personally don't think the one idea has to mutually exclude the other, in that we can all be understood as beings who are both in and of ourselves, but also that we have what Freud termed an imago, a presence in other people's minds. So the reality of me and the way my friends, my relatives, my students, people who can't stand me, there's a lot of them around, the way they understand me, they have a mental image in their head, which is what Freud called the imago, this idea of me. So there is me, and then there is the idea of me, except there is not one idea of me. Each person who has met me and made a connection, and can remember me and made a connection to me. Lots of people might have sat next to me on a train and totally forgotten about me 3 seconds later, but those who retain a memory of me each have their own individual imago of me. So if there are 500 people in the world who have a memory of me, there's 500 imagos of me, and there's me. You could argue, Freud certainly did, and Jung and others have echoed this idea, that I have an imago of myself. So my self-image is an image, it's like a painting or a sculpture. It's fixed at a point, and it's not necessarily reflecting how other people understand me. It's not necessarily reflecting how I might come to understand myself 10 years' time, because that imago can shift and turn and evolve over a period of time. It's like a snapshot of what I think I'm like, not necessarily an accurate view of what I really am like. So someone who has very low self-esteem, can't stand themselves, might have a very negative imago of themselves, which is quite limited, and they don't believe they can do this, that, the other things, when in fact they can do those things, and so they have a very skewed picture of themselves. Likewise, a raging narcissist will have a very overblown view of themselves. Very few people perhaps have a truly accurate view of themselves. And we could question, is it even possible to have a truly accurate view of yourself, in that we are unfolding beings? I can have a reasonable understanding of what I am like now at this point in time, but that's not necessarily going to be an understanding of what I'm going to be like when I'm 80, if I live to be 80. So I might have become a different, well, hopefully I will have become a different sort of person by the time I'm 80 than at this age. Or likewise, the person I am now is not quite the person I was when I was 20. It's not remotely the person I was when I was 20. So we're unfolding, evolving beings in that sense. And so the imago is like it's a snapshot. It's a temporal image of what somebody is like, rather than what they're truly like. When we think of gods and goddesses for those pagans who do think of multiple gods and goddesses, and say not all of them do, but for those who do, we might be sitting there thinking of Cernunnos in the forests, or Poseidon in the oceans. Are we seeing the fullness of that entity, or are we seeing a snapshot, an imago, or if you want to kind of go with the Greek notion, an eidolon, an object of reflection, like a mirror, but also an object of reverence and worship? I'd argue that it's perhaps not even remotely possible to grasp the entirety of a deity. If you can't grasp the entirety of yourself and you're quite a small being, how the hell can you grasp the reality of something that's a cosmic entity? So what you get is a tiny snapshot. And that's perhaps why you get in Greek myth that Zeus appears to Semele, for argument's sake. Long story short, for various reasons, he manifests before her in his true shape, not in the shape he has been using to visit her for a bit of nocturnal rumpy-pumpy. When she sees the true shape of Zeus, she incinerates. She can't cope. Not because he's sort of hideously awful or anything like that, but because he's so vast, so bright, so dazzling, so overwhelming. He is the king of Olympus. He is everything, and everything is too much. And so she's reduced to ashes. And he has to rescue the unborn child from her womb, who goes on to become Dionysus, and that's a whole other story. There's several tales like that of mortals who, for one reason or another, come to see the gods in their fullness rather than in a temporary disguise, which is normally how the gods walk upon earth when they want to visit someone. They disguise themselves as a beggar or an animal or whatever. So they kind of have like a mask they put on, and we see the mask, and we can talk to the mask and manage the mask. What we can't manage is the thing behind the mask. If that's true of gods, maybe it's true of humans, maybe it's true of all sorts of beings, that the fullness of the soul, of the spark within it, would be just so overwhelming that even if the image of being reduced to ash, you don't have to take that too literally, it doesn't mean your body would explode in flames, but perhaps your mind would be left as a bit of a train wreck, because it would be so overwhelmed by the experience of an encounter with something that vast, that enormous, that complex, that ancient, that overwhelming. And so it's better for our minds to look at the mask and have a kind of a minimal interaction, rather than trying to bite off more than we can chew by seeing the overwhelming reality of it. Mentioned that there is a sort of a précis version, kind of a summary version of that quote from Jung, which is often put across in the phrase that people don't have ideas, ideas have people. I've certainly heard Jordan Peterson say that. I don't know if he's the first person to say it, or he got that kind of shortened version of Jung's statement from somebody else who may have got it from somebody else who may have got it from somebody else. So quite who originated that, I don't actually know. But it's a sort of a nutshell version of that rather longer quote, although it loses, I think, some of the context of the original thing that Jung was saying. What Jung is drawing on, which Rollo May, who's also of similar ideas in many respects, transcendental psychologist, therapist. I say he was, I think maybe he's still alive. I can't remember. Anyway, if you're still alive, no offense. Ideas, complexes, mental accruals of thought and outlook and understanding, where a set of ideas, a set of beliefs, a set of assumptions, a set of working practices and guidance, helpful or otherwise, coalesce, it comes together, it becomes a complex. Well, at least that's the phrase that Jung uses. You could call it something else entirely if you prefer, but it comes together, and Jung says it exists in the collective unconscious. Now, the phrase which Rollo May uses, the word which Rollo May uses, which he got from Greek philosophical and religious belief, daimone. The daimones are, that's where we get the word demon from.
which Christianity has shifted to mean something entirely evil and frightening and disturbing. Daimones, in the original sense, are quite frightening, in fairness, but they're not evil necessarily. You can get good ones, benevolent ones, kindly ones, morally neutral ones, and dangerous, high-risk ones. But even the good ones are so potent, it's a little, having contact with them is a little bit like shoving your fingers in a plug socket. Yeah, so even the good ones, you have to kind of keep at a bit of a distance because they are so potent, so forceful, so overwhelming that, again, like seeing Zeus without his mask on, it overwhelms you. So you don't incinerate, but you are impacted so profoundly that you'll be knocked for six, and not necessarily in a good way. In fact, very rarely in a good way. Greek religion describes the daimones as, if I can put it in this way, rather like one-note characters. So whereas the gods, the Olympians, are very complex beings with a multitude of aspects to themselves, a multitude of expressions and understandings, a daimon, which is the singular term, is an entity that exists primarily in one emotional state or one qualitative state. So there is one for hate, there is one for love, there is one for hope, there is one for grief, there is one for youth, there is one for age, and so they are conceptual beings, which is somewhat like what Jung is talking about when he talks about complexes. For the Greek mind, the ancient Greek philosophers and everyday people who accepted the reality of these things, these were roaming entities. They sort of wandered around the place, and occasionally people would bump into one. Sometimes it would be sheer fluke that you bump into one, and sometimes it's more that you are exhibiting the emotion associated with the daimon. And so the daimon is drawn to you rather like a magnetic, it kind of homes in on you. And if it takes a shine to you, it sort of latches on, and by latching on, it, well, quite what it does, I suppose, is open to debate. But in some sense, it grows stronger. I'm trying to avoid using the word feeds because that conjures up all sorts of horror movie imagery. But it attunes itself to the individual that it is attached to. And the one note emotion or experience so overwhelms the individual that they can think of very little else. So if you are overwhelmed by the spirit of love, then you're filled with love, you're filled with passion, you're filled with desire for whoever the object of your desire is, which at one level sounds absolutely lovely. It sounds a little bit Mills and Boon. But the reality of it is that overwhelming potency of love is more kind of psycho stalker than Mills and Boon. You become obsessed with pursuing the object of your love, no matter what the cost, no matter what the harm, no matter whether they are remotely interested in you or not. It becomes irrational, unthinking, and an intensive emotion, which, if the object of your love reciprocates, I suppose, is great. But if they don't, if they run screaming in the opposite direction, that could be a remarkably dangerous and unhealthy thing. And so think of people who obsess over celebrities, and they cover the walls of their rooms with 1,001 photographs of their celebrity, and have cast off old sock from the celebrity framed in a glass case on the wall, and they turn up to every event the celebrity is at, and they have no normal healthy relationships with ordinary people because they're so absolutely convinced this celebrity is the one for them. These days we talk of that in various psychiatric terms. We use the language of psychiatry. Back in ancient Greece, they used the language of religion. They used the language of the daimon, that this person has been ridden, possessed, overwhelmed, as per that quote from Jung. They have fallen into this idea, into this daimon, and vanished forever. Well, have they vanished forever, or can they ever be sort of hauled back out and rescued? That's the work of, these days, the therapist, and in ancient Greece, the work of the priest, the healer, to try and rescue, redeem, save the person from that overwhelming idea into which they have fallen. Some people, me, vanish forever and never be seen again, and the idea eats them alive until there's nothing left of them. Other people, perhaps with a bit of help or sheer blind luck, get over it and pull themselves out of the daimon and re-establish their own individuality. Because just as in a little bit earlier, just as Zeus and Apollo and Artemis and Aphrodite and Hera and all the rest of them are intensely complex beings with a multitude of aspects, not a single note, that is, of course, true of us as human beings too. We are not monomaniacal entities with one idea in our head, with one emotional state in which we exist. We have the full range of emotions. We have thousands of ideas floating around our head at any given time until we become obsessed. And in this, although the quote from Jung uses the word possession, you could equally call it obsession. And so something takes hold of you, and then that's all there is in your life. Nothing else comes to exist, and that's dangerous because it reduces you as a human being. You cease to be this full, complex, dynamic, multifaceted entity, and you become a one-note, one-trick pony, basically. And that's not healthy. It's not good. It's a dangerous state to be in. By using a word like possession, which conjures up images of from various different religions of spirits and demons and angels and whatnot taking over someone. That's which is a very conscious use of language by Jung there, because that's very much how Rollo May understands it. It's very much how the ancient Greeks understand it. That these forces existed in what Jung calls the collective unconscious. The ancient Greeks would have spoken about the spirit world, the beings that float in the spirit world, and they grab onto someone, they consume them, or at least have a bit of a nibble if they don't consume them completely, and then they sometimes leave that individual and move on back to the spirit world. So in other words, the complex, the spirit, the diamond, whatever the hell you want to call it, is not in the individual, it's outside the individual and comes onto them, possesses them for a while, and the individual inside that is obsessed rather as well as possessed. And then, if you're lucky, it moves away, whether through sheer fluke or whether because you get therapy, help, assistance, exorcism, whatever it is that works to help relieve the individual of their overwhelming presence, the overriding quality. Jung also went on to talk of inflation, which is nothing to do with economics in this context. Inflation is when an individual is so in tune with an archetype, one of these great grand presences, which you could potentially class as gods, or at least godlike, that it overwhelms their character. And again, they are kind of condensed down to one way of being rather than having a multitude ways of being. There was in the, when was that, 1970s, 1980s maybe, a comedy on TV called Sorry, in which Ronnie Corbett, and this, if anyone listening to this is not from Britain, then this will make no bloody sense to you whatsoever, but an actor called Ronnie Corbett played a librarian who was a very timid little man, very shy little man, and he lived at home with his parents, and even though he was in his late 30s, 40s, something like that, his mother, who was this monster of a woman, treated him like he was 6 years old, and she treated her husband like he was 6 years old. And whenever she met anyone in the street, she started treating them like they were 6 years old. From a Jungian point of view, you could say she was inflated, overwhelmed by the archetype of the Great Mother, such that she was constantly in mother mode, and she couldn't relate to anybody else except to see them in child mode. No matter how old they actually were, they were children to her. And so that's similar to this idea of daimonic possession, but it's upper level, if you like, in terms of the complexity. Rather than being a singular emotion, it's a notion that the only thing she can be is a mother. And that series ran for a few years, and it ended when the Ronnie Corbett character finally fell in love with a girlfriend and moved out to marry her and went off, escaped the clutches of his overbearing mother, and she was this kind of crisis moment. Oh, what am I going to do with my life? And then she gets a lodger who is just as mousy and timid and weird as her son, and she perpetuates her very unhealthy state of mind by just finding a new substitute child to fill the picture, and then it ends on that rather bleak note. People get stuck in ways of being. So to go back to that short quote, people don't have ideas, ideas have people, that paraphrasing of the Jungian notion. It's the sense that there are concepts, ideas, experiences floating around in human existence, and they home in on people. And for a while, the idea attaches to you, the passion, the notion, the experience, the concept attaches to you, and then it moves on to somebody else. So it outlasts you as such. So we might think, oh, I'm very clever, I've had this great idea, when it's more like well, you might be clever, but the idea is homed in onto you. You didn't have the idea, it came to you. In Irish, in the Gaelic language, the sentence structure reflects that, in that people don't they don't say, I am sad, as you would in English. They say the sadness is on me. The grammatical structure puts it, the sadness is externalized and comes on to the person. Or you might say the hunger is on me rather than I am hungry. And it perhaps doesn't make any great nevermind at one level. But if you say I am sad, you are sad. The sadness is in you, it defines you. Is there any other part of you that is not sad? It's as if this is the entirety of you. Whereas if you say the sadness is on me, and that idea almost like sadness has come outside and come onto you, then it's on you, but only on you for a while, and then it goes away again. So the sadness is not in you, it doesn't define you. You are not 100% sad. You are just having sadness sitting on your shoulder, as it were, for a while, and then hopefully at some point it'll go away again. Equally, you'd say the same, if it was joy or happiness, it's on me, and it will go away again. So anything therefore becomes transitory and in a sense externalized. Is that a better way of thinking about these things? Or I'm sure externalizing comes with its own problems, just as internalizing comes with its own problems. So it's just a different way of understanding how the human mind, the human experience works. Many pagans, myself included, often talk about the gods. So well, I focus in on a particular god or goddess quite a lot. And this might be referred to as a patron deity or a matron deity or by various other terms. That there's 101 deities out there, but I have a particularly close relationship with that one, or maybe those two. And people who are new to paganism or complete outsiders who sit and go, well, what the hell are you on about? I don't understand what you're talking about. So, well, do you choose? Do you just like open a book and you go through, oh, I'll close my eyes and I'll pick that god. All right, I'll go. Okay. How does that work? That's not how it works. Within polytheism and its various different expressions, there is often this notion that you don't have the god has you, in a sense. I.e., you don't initiate the relationship, rather the deity, the being, initiates the relationship, and then you have the choice as to how to respond. Do you run screaming for the hills, or do you say, oh, tell me more, and I want to establish a relationship here? So that the presence comes to you rather than you making some kind of conscious choice about going to it. And sometimes the presence that comes to you is not the one you assumed would come to you. It may be that the presence that comes to you is coming to you for a reason other than the one you might automatically think of. So to give you an example, in the ancient world, a lot of people would often go for or attend a temple of a deity because of geographical reasons. Like if you're an Athenian, you lived in Athens, you might well regularly go and worship at the temple of Athena because she is the patron goddess of the city you live in, possibly the one you were born in. And so there is a local relationship, but also you had people who would make choices from very much a career perspective. They were a blacksmith, so that they would give honour to the god of blacksmiths, Govanon or Govnu, or
Hephaestus or whoever it happened to be in that particular culture, which makes a certain sense. I do this activity, therefore I want to go and make offering to a deity associated with this activity that's very important to me. However, you do sometimes have people who have a deity drawn to them, introduces itself into their life, and it's sometimes a struggle to think, why? What interest would that deity have in that person? So, without naming names, I did know someone who was very, very, how can we put this politely, uh, self-important. Someone who was quite hard in their judgment of other people, didn't tolerate fools at all, had no time for other people's weaknesses or foibles, who was eventually drawn to a deity some years down the line after I knew this person, drawn to a deity of mercy and compassion and kindness and sensitivity. And it seemed like an odd, to me, that is, to an odd relationship at the time. I think it did to them as well for a while. But then again, maybe what that person needed was not a deity who was just as you know, forceful in their judgments as they were, but the dead opposite, someone who would come in and mellow them down, soften their edges, expand their personality away from being just a one-note thing into something a lot more complex and a lot more developed. And so I can think of several people I've known over the years who have fallen into relationships with entities that at first seem like very odd matches, opposites attract, all that kind of thing. But maybe there is that need for balance. And that's something that Jung talks about. He calls it an andromia. That because he talks about personality types, and he says there are several personality types. If you're too strong in this type of personality in this area, then you'll be drawn to the opposite. Puts everything on a diagram of 4 factors. It says 2 opposing and 2 opposing. So if you're too much on this side of the diagram, the qualities on that side of the diagram will go stronger in your life to sort of balance you out, because you have become imbalanced and therefore it needs to come up again to achieve a balance. So it might be you're drawn to people who are very opposite to you, or events keep happening synchronicitously in your life, where these are weird coincidences, if anyone's unfamiliar with the word synchronicity. It's very odd coincidences that happen to you, where the factor you are lacking keeps kind of banging on the front door of your life saying, let me in, until the day when you finally let the penny drop and you go, oh, yeah, maybe I need to be a bit more balanced rather than just top heavy in one area. Maybe I need a bit more of this quality in my life. And that might make me more bearable, might make me kinder, wiser, a better person, a better adapted person, a more complex person who's not just a one-trick pony, but has an expansion of being. Which I'd argue to some extent, have discussions with Sikhs and with Hindus who have the notion of moksha, that you progress through reincarnation to achieve a certain state. And they say, well, you as a pagan, I know, also believe in reincarnation. Do you think we're moving towards moksha or some similar kind of idea? As such, I don't, but I think the overall goal of multitudes of lives, as well as the passage of time within a singular life, is to try and get better. And what the hell is getting better? What does that mean? Well, to become a more sophisticated, more complex being, a more rounded being, so that you're not just like a daimon, a one-note, one-trick pony who just obsesses over one thing. You learn about the world from different angles, different ways of being, different understandings. Whether you do that by dying and being reborn in a different shape, or whether you do that by reading a ton of books, or by traveling the world, or by talking to hundreds of different types of people from different backgrounds, so that you start to learn what it's like to be someone other than you, and how they see the world, and why their experiences make them think this thing rather than whatever the thing is that you think. And so you don't have to agree with them necessarily, but you at least become more understanding and can see the world from different experiences, have different understandings, different levels of experience of the world. And there is that kind of movement outwards. Where was I going with this? Oh, yes. One of the arguments made with historians of Greek and Roman religion is that in the very, very, very early days of Greek and Roman religion, the gods were seen in much more simplistic fashion. So the Roman concept of the noumena, this just kind of presence of wonder to which no name or image was attached. And then after a couple of centuries, you got statues of Jupiter and statues of Juno and various other characters, various other deities, and they become personified and they become attached with stories and images. So it goes from the shall we say, the nebulous, the simple to the quite complex and involved. We could argue maybe that the daimon goes from being a one-note being, and perhaps over umpteen-million years it develops and becomes more complex and more sophisticated and accrues more angles, more aspects to itself, and so becomes this much more rounded entity. Have we gone from being the exceedingly simple souls animating amoebas umpteen-million years ago? Well, some people might still be there, but that's another one. To becoming more complex beings, more sophisticated beings, more evolved beings, which is an idea you find as in the Vedic religions. The idea that you start your spiritual journey as a quite simple creature, and you evolve up and up and up through death and death and rebirth into more and more complex shapes, and eventually you become a human, and then you wonder why you bothered. Part of it is expanding your sort of spiritual horizons through being different things, different entities, different experiences, so that you are not in the grip of one, but you experience many. And that is the hazard, if you like, of being in the grip of one. The idea has you're in the grip of one thing, rather than that you should try and expand out and experience different things from different angles over time. So you might well have a period of time when you are very, as modern day pagan, very closely attached to one particular deity, but does that mean that will be the one and only deity you will engage with over the rest of your life? Or will others come into your life and talk to you and get you to think about other things? Now, whether you understand those deities in a more Jungian sense, that these are just aspects of human existence, or whether you take it in the more polytheist sense, that these are real beings who turn up at your doorstep and want to talk to you occasionally, trying to sort of improve the kind of creature you are, or whatever motivation they have for turning up. It may not necessarily always be our interest that they're pursuing. However you understand them, the end result is that you become a more rounded being by shifting, moving, growing, expanding, considering things from different angles. That is a positive way to move in the world, a positive way to progress in the world. I'm sure there was some conclusion I was going to draw to on this, but I can't remember what it was. That's useful, isn't it? I should have written it down. Never mind. If I just leave these ideas floating around in this rather rambling and convoluted manner for a while, and then if anyone would like to post a question or a suggestion, or say I didn't understand a word of that, or indeed I agree with this bit but not that bit, or whatever it is you want to say, then we can do a sort of a follow-up, and I might, by the time we do the follow-up, actually remember what the hell it was I wanted to say this time round. Thanks for listening so far anyway. Bye.